All right, good evening. I was going to say good morning, not to take away from the thunder, but we all came from the Eli Stefanski Shiur. And I learned that it's always morning somewhere, right? That's what they said. It's always morning somewhere. And you can always say good morning wherever your shiur is. It was very, very good. Baruch Hashem gives a wonderful shiur. But as we were pointing out, one difference between our shiur and that shiur is that when you start in the Eli Stefanski Daf Yomi program, you get a free Gemara, right? But in our shiur, we help you build your full library. This is the new Kahal Yereim edition of Maseches Menachos, right? We're building the back end, right? We started from Sanhedrin, and we're working our way towards the end of Shas. Then we'll circle around to the beginning. $18. A bargain at twice the price, as they say around town. And please, you make sure that you send your messages through the chat if you have not gotten yours already. And it comes with an embossed Kahal Yereim logo, no extra. It's included. It's included.
Is that 18 Canadian dollars?
That is 18 Canadian dollars. That's a good point too. Yes, as we use them. 8 lines down from the top. Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis. So let's finish our way up. I hope we can finish tonight. Tano, we learned. Roeh, we said that you could eat kodshe kalim as long as you, from the entire distance, that you could see Shiloh. So that which we said you could see it, sham roeh kulo velo hamafsik beino leveno. That you have to be able to see the whole thing. You have to be able to see Shiloh clearly, not with something in between, right? You can't have like a tree or a mountain in the way or something like that. Amar le Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim, Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim says to Rabbi Elazar, Asbralach kagon be knishka de Ma'on. I will explain to you. It's like the shul that they had in Ma'on, which apparently I didn't find where exactly that is, but where that shul used to be, you apparently had a clear vision of exactly where Shiloh was. Amar of Papa says, Roeh she'amru, a lo roeh kulo el roeh miktasa. Rav Papa says that which we said that you have to be able to see. You don't have to see the entire thing. You can only if you can see part of it, right? I guess if you're looking to a tree and you see through the leaves and it's sort of obstructed, you're okay. Boy, Rav Papa. So Rav Papa wants to know though. Omeid v'roeh yoshev ve'eno roeh. Let's say you stand up and you can see it, but when you sit down, you can't see it. There's an obstruction. So what about that case? And you're sitting when you're eating it. So boy Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to know Omeid al gabe hanachal v'roeh b'tocha nachal eno roeh. You're on a ravine, right? And you're on the top of it, you can see, but inside, you're down below, you can't see. So what about that? So teku. So that we're not 100% sure of, and since we're not, like I was asked the questions like, well, what are we worrying about it? We're really not going to ever have a bamos ever again, right? Or we're not going back to Shiloh because now the Yerushalayim is, once it's been established, that's going to be the location forever. So it's interesting. Either it's because we have to learn it, right? And that's important. Or, so I mean, that's kind of essentially that we're going to ask Mashiach questions that are not relevant l'maisa, right? That's what we have to say from here. Ki Ozer of Dimi, Rav Dimi came from Yisrael. Amar Rabbi said in Arabic, B'shosh makom sharsha shchina al Yisrael. There were 3 locations that the Shechina rested in Eretz Yisrael: B'Shilo, Nov v'Givon, ubeis olamim. Right. So those are the 3 places: Shiloh, Nov, and Givon, and Yerushalayim, the eternal place of the Shechina, not the first place where we had said, right. But Gilgal is not listed there where the Shechina was. It's interesting, right? Gilgal is not listed there. Ubekulan lo sharsa ela bechilik binyamin. All of those places where the Shechina rested happened to be in the portion of Binyamin. When all the Shvatim got their divisions, so that's where Binyamin's Chelek has all of those locations in it. Shenemar, the pasuk says, Chofef alav kol yom, that the Hashem he hovers upon it all day. Kol chafifos lo yuhu ela bechelko. All of the hoverings of Hashem will only be in his portion shel Binyamin. Ki ozor Abaye, when Abaye came Amra, he said, Kamed Rav Yosef, he said in front of Rav Yosef, Amar chad bra hava le lechayel velo miskan. He says it's a shame that Rav Yosef says it's a shame that Kailel, which is Abaye's father's name, also Superman's father's name, isn't it? Kalel, right?
Superman's name.
Right? That's Kalel, right? His son? No, he's son of Kalel, right? Anyway, I was thinking, I'm sorry, that's where my mind goes. Really, Stefanski won't hit you with that one, by the way, but no, somebody will look up the trivia, but But in any event, Abaye is apparently Superman. So Abaye, right? He had one son, And it turns out he's not so good, right? Because he didn't understand, right? That he says that Binyamin, that all of the places where all of these locations were in Binyamin's place, they're not. Because we have a pasuk in Tehillim, the pasuk says, "Vayitosh Mishkan Shiloh," that Hashem abandons his dwelling place in Shiloh. Uksiv Vayim Asbo Ma'ohel Yosef Ubeshevet Ephraim. He became disgusted with the tent that was in Yosef and in the tribe of Ephraim. Lo Bachar, he has not chosen. So therefore, the place of Shiloh seems to have been in Yosef's portion, in Ephraim's portion, and not in Binyamin's portion. So how could he miss that? Amar Rav Ada explained, my kakasha, what is the problem? What is Rav Yosef bothered by? Dilma Shechina b'chelik Binyamin v'sanhedrin gedola b'chelik Yosef. Right? Maybe the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, was in Shiloh, was in Binyamin's portion, and the Sanhedrin, which is right next door, was in Yosef's portion. We see the same thing in the Beis HaMikdash itself. The Shechina bechelko sheBinyamin. Remember when we drew the picture, we had the Shechina in Binyamin's portion, the Sanhedrin bechelek Yehuda, and the Sanhedrin was in Yehuda's portion. All the part to the west was, from the Mizbeach to the west, was in Yehuda's portion, or all the part to the east was in Binyamin's portion. So Amar Le Haki Hashta. What are you talking about? Hasam Mikarva Nachlos Gabe Hadadi. There, the borders between Yehuda and Binyamin were right next to each other, and they almost overlap right near Yerushalayim. So it makes sense that a portion of Yehuda could have been right up against where Binyamin was. Hachami Mikarvan, but Shiloh, if you look at where it is on a map, is nowhere near the Ephraim border, right?
Deep into it.
It's deep into territory. See, as long as somebody knows his Navi. So it's deep into Binyamin territory. So Hachanami
Ephraim territory.
Into Ephraim territory. That's right. Yeah. So it's right into Ephraim territory. Okay, so that doesn't work. So Hachanami Mikarvan. So the answer is no. It is close. Why? Kedama Rabbi Chanina. So Rabbi Chanina says in Rabbi Chanina, Retu Haiso Yotzis Mechalko Sheyehuda v'Nichnesses LeChalko Shebinyamin. Even in the Beis HaMikdash, we had a strip of land that shot out from the Binyamin, from the Yehuda portion and went into Binyamin. That's why we didn't build a Yesod around the south side and the west side of the Mizbeach, right? Because that was in the portion, that section was in the portion of Yehuda. Ubahaya Mizbeach Banui. In that section, that's where Yehuda's, that's where the Mizbeach was built. Vahaya Binyamin Hatzadik Mitztar Leha Libal Ah. And Binyamin Hatzadik was all worried about it. He wanted to consume it. Right, he wanted to get that last little bit back. So Hachanami here too. There was a strip of land that shot in. It's almost like, I don't know if you follow American politics, but the redistricting that they're going through, right? They're drawing up all kinds of crazy boundaries in order to be able to put all the Democrats in one section and all the Republicans, right? So therefore, there's a crazy boundary, and it shot right up into went from Yosef's chelek into Binyamin's chelek. That's what it says to Anna Shiloh, that the sighing of Shiloh. What's the sighing of Shiloh? That's Binyamin sighing that Shiloh, he lost a little bit of Shiloh to Yosef. That's why they say it's in Binyamin's. I think it's in Binyamin's part, because Binyamin seems to be the one who's sighing. He lost a little bit of it. But I will defer if somebody knows exactly where Shiloh is and in whose portion. But okay, so the answer is Kitanai. So it's a machlokas Tanayim. Right, Chofeif alav zeh mikdash rishon. This is what the Tanaim say. When the pasuk says Chofeif alav, that the base that the Shechina dwells upon Binyamin's section, that's the first Beis HaMikdash. Kol hayom, all day, zeh mikdash sheni. That's the second Beis HaMikdash. Ubein kseifav shachein, and between his shoulders he dwells. Elu yemos Mashiach. That's the third Beis HaMikdash. Rebbe says if you've got a Yehoshua, if you've got a Sefer Yehoshua, it might be in the back of that too, right?
So map here, but it doesn't really call out
where that section is, where Shiloh is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but in any event, we can see, here's, right, let's hold up for the camera. You've got your Binyamin section. Ephraim is right next to it, right? And Yehuda and Binyamin are on there. That's where Yerushalayim is. Where exactly Shiloh is, we don't see on the map, right? So therefore,
in here he says that
a
strip of land went out from Ephraim into Binyamin.
Right.
And inside that is where the Sanhedrin was.
Inside. Right, where Sanhedrin would be, correct, inside the Shiloh. That would be his explanation. Where Shiloh would be, that little strip of land would go to Shiloh, and that would be the Sanhedrin.
Right.
Okay. Fine.
Also, and then, therefore, the Shiloh, where the Mishkan was in Binyamin.
Was in Binyamin's territory, correct. But that doesn't contradict the pasuk in Tehillim that says it's in Yosef, because the Sanhedrin is in Yosef. So, okay, but this version has that it says that this machlokas tanoim is telling us that it was not until the first Beis Hamikdash that it was in Binyamin's territory. Shiloh was not in Binyamin's territory according to this opinion, right? Only the first Beis Hamikdash, second Beis Hamikdash, and third Beis Hamikdash. And then the other opinion says, Rebbe Omer Chofef Alav, that he floated above it, Zeh ha'olam hazeh, that's this world. Kol hayom, then that is Elu Yemos HaMashiach, that is the world of Mashiach. Ubeik Seifav Shachein, Zeh Olam Haba. Beik Seifav is in the Olam Haba. Now, Olam Hazeh is all inclusive of the Mishkan and Shiloh and so all of that is in Chelek Binyamin. So therefore, right, that's a machlokas, whether Shiloh is in Ephraim territory or Binyamin territory is machlokas. Tana Rabbanan. Rabbis, Yemei Ohel Moed Sheba Midbar. Let's do some math. The Yemei Ohel Moed, since we'll do our high-tech version, right? We've got our tech. I don't know if this is the good marker. Let's go with these markers. Okay. First of all, let's note some numbers here. Okay, so first of all, from the time of, just open on the top here. From the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim until the destruction of the first Beis until the first Beis Hamikdash was 480 years. We know that they were in the Midbar for 40 years, right? Those are some numbers that we know. We also know the first Beis Hamikdash stood for 410 years. We know that if we want to know from the time they entered Eretz Yisrael, we're going to subtract 480 minus 40, right? And so therefore, they're going to be the whole time from when they enter Eretz Yisrael until the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is a total of 850 years. Okay, so those are some numbers that at least we certainly know from Sukkim. 480 years, 410 years. Okay, so now let's do some math. Okay, so Tanarban Yemei Oel Moed Sheba Midbar. The Oel Moed that stood in the Midbar was Arbaim Shana Chaser Achas. 40 years minus 1 year. Why? Because they didn't put up the Mishkan until the second year they were in the Midbar. So they were spent 40 years in the Midbar. So 39 years, that's the Oel Moed. That's Yemei Oel Moed Sheba Gilgal Arba Asrei. And then the time that the Oel Moed was in Gilgal is going to be 14 years. 14, just so we keep track. It's 14 years. Zayin Shekavshu, Zayin Shechelku, which is 7 years that they conquered the land, and 7 years they divided up. Yemei Oel Moed Shebenov v'Givon, Chamisha v'Sheva. The time that the Oel Moed was in Nov and Givon is 57 years. Okay, 57. If you do the math and you subtract this from 480, where's Yehuda's going to take out his calculator? He's taking it out right now. 480 minus 57 minus 14 minus 39 is going to give us 369. So he says, 370 minus 1, 369. So that's where we're going to know that that Shiloh stood for 369 years. That's what our Mishnah says. It stands for 369 years. And how do I know? Let's go through some of those numbers we took for granted. The Oel Moed was in the desert for 40 years. Minus 1, how do I know? Because Mar says, Shana Rishona also Moshe as HaMishkan. The first year they built the Mishkan. Shnia Hukam HaMishkan Nisan. In the second year they put it up. V'shalach Moshe Meraglim, and then Moshe sent spies out after that. Shebe Gilgal, Arba Asrei, it was in Gilgal for 14 years. Sheva Shekavshu v'Sheva Shechalku, 7 years that they conquered it, in 7 years that they divided it. Minol, and how do I know that? Amar Kalev made a statement. He said, Ben Arba'im. This is at the end after they divided up after they had already conquered everything and they began to divide up. He said the following: Ben Arba'im Shana Nochi B'Shlach Moshe Eved Hashem Osi Mikadesh Barnea LeRagel Es Aretz. I was 40 years old when I was a spy. Moshe Rabbeinu sent me in the desert. I was a spy. I was 40 years old. Ve'eshiv Oso Davar, and I brought him back the good report. Kasher. Im livavi, like whatever the report that I thought in my own conscience to give. Uksiv, then it says, Vatahine anochi ayom ben chamishu shmonim shon. Now I'm 85 years old. So how does that work? Ki of Reil Yardain bar Kamahavi. How old was he when they crossed the Jordan River then? Well, you got to see Bar Shivin Vitimni. He would have been 78 Why? Because he could have been 79, but he was 78 because he was 40 when they left the Midbar. Then he was already he was 40 when he was a spy, which means there were only 39 years left in the desert, minus actually another half a year because he was already sent in Av. Right, Tisha B'Av is when they were sent, and they didn't come. They came back on Tisha B'Av. So therefore, we know that 38 and a half years later, is when they crossed the Jordan River. Hence, he was 78 when they crossed the Jordan River. Now he's 85. That means there were 7 years it took them to conquer the land. Okay, so that's how we get that number. Now, we know, and how do I know it took 7 years to divide the land up? It's a little bit tricky. Logically, if it took 7 years to conquer it, it takes 7 years to divide it up. Not quite sure why, but that's either they had a tradition that was the case, or that makes reasonable, right? That's the reason why Hashem made it take 7 years to conquer it, was in order to make it so that it took 7 years to divide up. If you want, Achar asher huksa ha'ir. The answer is because we've got a very confusing pasuk that is in Yechezkel. Yechezkel gets a nevuah, and the nevuah happens 14 years after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and it says, the pasuk in full says that he received a nevuah on Rosh Hashanah, which was the 10th day of the month. Well, Rosh Hashanah is not ever the 10th day of the month, it's the first day of the month. The answer is, not if Rosh Hashanah falls out on Yom Kippur. When does Rosh Hashanah fall out on Yom Kippur? On a Yovel year. When Yovel comes out, they blow the shofar on Yom Kippur to proclaim freedom throughout the land. That is when Yom Kippur is Rosh Hashanah. So, therefore, the 14th year, so therefore the 14th year after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was a Yovel year. Now, how many years were they in Eretz Yisrael? So we said that 440 years, 480 minus 40, plus 410, 850 years. 850 is 50 times 17. That means they were there for 17 Yovel cycles. So, if they had started counting right when they walked into Eretz Yisrael, then the year of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash would have been a Yovel year. Clearly, they didn't start counting the Yovel until 14 years later. So therefore, that's why 14 years after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was a Yovel year. Therefore, it took another 7 years for them to separate out the land. Okay, that's more hinted in that one little word there, right? Oel Moed shebenov v'givon 57 minolan. How do we know that in Nov and Givon it was 57 years? We just threw that out there. How come? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, "Vahi kehizkiro es Aaron Elokim." What happened was Eli is hearing the story of how they lost the battle, and he's being told all the terrible news. His sons died in the battle, and he's bearing all of it. But when he heard that the Aaron got captured, he fell off his chair and died. So, Vitana, then we learned, Kishemes Eli HaKohen Charva Shiloh. That was also when Eli died, Shiloh was destroyed. So that was the end of Shiloh. Ubola Nov, that's when they brought everything over to Nov. Kishemes Shmuel Haramasi Charva Nov. Now, that lasts when Shmuel Haramasi dies, right? Shmuel Hanavi, he dies, so then that's the end of Nov, Ubola Givon. And then they go over to Givon. So, Uksiv, now we learned, Vayim Yom Sheves HaAron Bekiryas Ya'arim, when the Aron got to a place called Kiryas Ye'arim, when they moved out of Shiloh, they brought the Aron to a place called Kiryas Ye'arim. Vayirbu Yamim, and now you have planned out what's going to be temporary, but it wound up being a little bit more than temporary. Vayu Esrim Shana, it was there for 20 years. The Aron wound up being there for 20 years, while the rest of everything else was in Nov and Givon. Right? That we said it was in that the Mishkan was in Nov and Givon. The Aron was not there together with it in Nov and Givon, and it was in Kiryas Ye'arim. Okay, so now, Vayanehu Kol Beis Yisrael Achrei Hashem. At that point, they brought the Bnei Yisrael started to follow Hashem. Now, Hani Esrim Shana. So then we know that Nov had already been set up during those 20 years. The Aron was in Kiryas Ye'arim for 20 years. That's the first 20 years that Nov was set up. Then Eser Shana Shemalach Shmuel Ba'atzmo. Shmuel was the Navi before there was a king for 10 years, right? V'Shana Shemalach Shmuel v'Shaul. Then Shmuel appoints Shaul the king. They work together for a year. Shaul being the king and Shmuel being the Navi that helps him. Ushtayim Shemalach Shaul. Then Shmuel says, that's it, I give up on you, Shaul, and he walks away from Shaul. Shaul winds up being by himself for 2 more years. V'sheva de David, and then 7 years that David is the king in Hebron. Before there is that comes next. Dichsiv, how do we know that? Dichsiv, v'yamim asher malach David al Yisrael mem shana. David was king for a total of 40 years. Bechevron, malach zayin shanim. He was a king in Hebron for 7 years, and then he was another, and then he was there, and then another 33 years. So if you take, right, so that's that 10 plus 1 plus 2 plus 7 is 20 years that were going on. So we know that the Mizbeach, the Aron was in Kiryas Yearim, the Mishkan was in Nov, all those 20 years, right? Nov and Gibeon was there for those 20 years, which took place all during Shmuel's time. From Shmuel was in charge, all the way into Shaul's time, all the way into the first 7 years of David HaMelech's reign. Then Ubeshlomo Ksiv, then we go another 33 years that David HaMelech brings the Aron up to Yerushalayim, but they don't build a Beis HaMikdash yet. Ubeshlomo Ksiv vayachal livnoso bishnas arba l'malchuso. Shlomo winds up completing the first Beis HaMikdash the 4th year of his reign. So if you take 20 years plus 33, so that gives you 50. That's 20 plus 33 is 53 plus 4 is 57. So that gives you your 57 years that that everything was taking place in Nov and Givon until eventually the Beis Hamikdash was built. Nishtairu l'shilo. That means that if we take this 57 and the 40 and this 14 out, so then we know Nishtairu l'shilo shoshmos v'shivim v'chaser achas. We're back to 369 years, which is the Shiloh time.
The whole time of David, it's still in Nov and Givon.
It seems so, yes. The Aron was there.
Aron is in Yerushalayim.
Right.
Okay.
They brought the Aron. Now, sidetracked, because they were bringing it up, and then they touched it, and somebody died, so they'd bring it someplace else. That was, yes.
For like 6 months, and then they tried again, right? Something like that.
That's right. Now, Bola Nova Givon. So they came to Nova and Givon. So, what did the Mishnah say? There we said that the bamos became mutter, and koche kochim could be eaten within the curtains, and koche kalim could be eaten anywhere in any city in Yerushalayim. Okay, and until they came to Yerushalayim, then the bamos became prohibited. So now, mina nimili, how do I know that this is the case? So it says, because you haven't come to the place yet, you're allowed the bamos. Why? Because you still haven't come to the place called menucha and the place called nachala. El menucha, what is the menucha place? Which is the place you can't do when the bamos, when Mishkan is set there. Zu Shiloh. And Nachala zu Yerushalayim, and Nachala is Yerushalayim. So when the Mishkan was in Shiloh, and when the Beis HaMikdash was in Yerushalayim, no more bamos. Okay, lama chelkan. Why is it that, if that is the case, that the pasuk tells us these two things separately? El ha-menucha ve'el ha-nachala. Kedei litain heter bein zeh lezeh. To tell us that between the two, it was permitted to do bamos, right? When the Mizbeach was in Nov and Givon, it was okay, bamos were fine. Amal Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, Meiser Sheni Nami Lisni. What about Meiser Sheni? If you could eat Kodshe Kalim, couldn't you eat also Meiser Sheni? Why is Meiser Sheni not listed in the Mishnah as to be eaten in all of the cities of Eretz, were around Nova Givon, or wherever it's supposed to be eaten? Some relay. Meiser sham me aron kayalfi. The answer is because there's a gzera shava. It says the word sham. The whole pasuk is ve'vesim shama olos seichem ve'zivchechem ve'asmasro seichem. You're going to bring over there your olos and your zvachim and your maisros and your truma and all of those things. V'nidreichem v'nidvosem b'choros b'karchem b'tzonchem, and you're going to eat them sham lifnei Hashem. You're going to eat them there before Hashem. Then it says v'samta sham in Shmos. It said v'samta sham es aron ha'idus. You're going to put the aron there. So what is it that you have to eat meiser sheni in a specific location before the Mishkan? That is when the aron is there. We know that in Nov and Givon the aron was not there. So therefore, there's no obligation to eat meiser sheni in that area. Kaven to aron lohava meiser nami lohava. So there was no meiser sheni. There was no obligation to eat Meiser Sheni in a specific location during that time. So Yachi, Pesach Kachim Nami. If that's the way you're going to learn it, so then in the pasuk that we learn Meiser Sheni doesn't get brought. It lists all these other korbanos, your olos and your zvachim. Also, Korban Pesach shouldn't be brought. right? Desham, because Desham Sham Me Aron, you're going to learn the Gzera Shava Sham Sham from the Aron. That if there's no Aron, you don't bring those other korbanos. Dekaven to Aron Lohava, Inunami Lohava. There's no Aron, you don't bring those. Samar Le, Damar Lachamani, Rabbi Shimon. He says, you're right, forget that answer. We're going to say that whose opinion is it that there's no Meiser Sheni? It's going to be Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Damar Af Tzibor Lo Hikrivu Ela Pesach Vechovos Hakavu Lehen Zman. Rabbi Shimon had said that on the Bama Gedola, the only type of korbanos that you could bring, as we learned yesterday, were those that were set, right? Those that were set with times. And Korban Pesach also, right? Was not, even though it wasn't a Korban Tzibor, it wasn't a community Korban, it had a set specific time. So therefore, if it has a specific set time, so then that would be able to be brought. Now, of a Chovos, She'en Kavul Zman, if there's an obligation that doesn't have a set time, so then Hachva Hachi Lo Karev. So then you wouldn't bring it. So what's an example of a animal that doesn't have a set time? Meiser Behema, Chovos She'en Lan Kavul Zman, who a animal, 10th animal, is supposed to be brought. It's an obligatory offering, but it doesn't have a set time. So therefore they couldn't bring it. So, okay. Therefore, those Meiser animals were not brought as korbanos during the times of Nov and Givon. The Iskas Meiser Dogan Meiser Behema. There's a hekesh between Meiser, says your Meisros. So therefore the hekesh tells us that just whenever you don't bring the 10th animal, you also don't bring Meiser Sheni. So therefore, since they couldn't bring that, they couldn't bring that either. Dil Rabbi Yehuda, right, who argues Rabbi Yehuda's pshita, he argues, and he says that you can bring Meiser animals because they're obligatory offerings. We bring those on the Bamas Tzibor. He says Karav. So then in Dehamar, you're right. He would say that you could bring Meiser Sheni. Dehamar Rav Ada Bar Masa. Rav Ada Bar Masa says Meiser Sheni, Meiser Behema, Nechol and Benova Givon. The Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that Meiser in Nov and Givon they had Meiser Sheni there. That's where they ate their Meiser Sheni. V'habai Bira. What about the fact that you need a bira? You need it to be a Beis Hamikdash to be established there. You need this. So the Lav Tani Rav Yosef, didn't Rav Yosef learn on that? Shalosh Biros Hain. There are 3 places that are called bira: Shiloh, Nov, Givon, Ubeis Olamim. So it's included. Hatani La Vehu Amar La. In fact, he's the one who taught that brisa, and then he explained upon it Lachilas Meiser Sheni Veli Rabbi Yehuda. Why is it called bira? To tell me that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you could eat Meiser Sheni there. So it all fits. Good.
According to Shimon, you're putter from
Meiser eat
Sheni that year.
It seems like yes. Can I have grab a tissue?
Yes.
Thank you.
Or you redeem it. Or even that you can't.
I don't think you redeem. I don't think it gets kedushas the way it seems like me. There's no Meiser Sheni when there's no. That's what I think it is. Okay, thank you. Boili Yerushalayim, they get to Yerushalayim. So it says, you have not yet, as Moshe Rabbeinu is leaving, they're coming into Eretz Yisrael, it says, you have not gotten to the place yet where the Menucha is or the Nachala is. So these are the places where the Bamos were not allowed. Menucha and Nachala. So Yerushalayim is on this list. Why? Menucha is Shiloh, Nachala is Yerushalayim. Menucha is Shiloh and Nachala is Yerushalayim. So the Omer, this is what he's saying, because it says, the pasuk says, how do I know Yerushalayim is called Nachala? It says, and Shiloh is called Menucha, because the pasuk says, V'omer li Nachala si k'arye ba'yar. I have a Nachala, an inheritance, which is like a lion in the forest. V'omer hayet tzavua Nachala si li hayet saviv aleha. I have a colored bird that is my inheritance, and all of the other birds are coming to attack it. What is that bird? That is referring to Yerushalayim. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learns it. He says that the Nachala is Yerushalayim. Rabbi Shimon says Menucha zu Yerushalayim, Nachala zu Shiloh. He says it backwards. He says the other way around. He says Menucha is Yerushalayim, Nachala is Shiloh. The Omer, because he has psukim that says Zos Menucha say Adei Ad. This is my Menucha, my place of resting forever. And Menucha, that would be Yerushalayim. Poe Shev Ki EVCha, this is where I will dwell because I have desired it. For Omer, and the pasuk says, Ki bachar Hashem b'Tzion, Hashem has chosen Tzion, Eva l'Moshe V'lo, he has desired to dwell there. So now, they're just having a dispute. Which one's Yerushalayim? Is it Nachala or is it Menucha? So Bishlam Alaman Damar Menucha zu Shiloh. I understand if you say Menucha Shiloh and Nachala is Yerushalayim, the pasuk makes sense. Dechsev ala Menucha la Nachala. You haven't gotten to Menucha yet, and you haven't gotten to Nachala yet. First you'll get to Menucha, Shiloh. After in history you'll get to Nachala. Alaman Damar Menucha zu Yerushalayim, Nachala zu Shiloh. But if it's the other way around, Menucha is Yerushalayim, you haven't gotten to Yerushalayim yet, and you still haven't gotten to Shiloh. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's the wrong order. El Nachala Menucha miboile. It should say Nachala first, and then Menucha second. No, hachikamar. This is what it means. Lomi boy menucha de lo matisu, ela afilu lenachla nami lo matisu. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, not only is it true that you haven't gotten to Yerushalayim yet, you haven't even gotten to Shiloh yet. You got a long way to go. So that is what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. So therefore, that's why Yerushalayim is listed first. Tana de Rishma, we learned in a brisa from Yeshiva Rishma, Zu v'Zu Shiloh. He says both Menucha and Nachla are both Shiloh. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Shimon says Zu v'Zu Yerushalayim. Both of those places, Menucha and Nachla, are both Yerushalayim. Well, we're going to have a problem with that. Bishlam and Lamandam are Menucha Zu Shiloh and Nachal Zu Yerushalayim. I understand, according to the opinion, it says that Menucha Shiloh and Nachal Zu Yerushalayim, or Inam Yivcha, or even the other way around. That Menucha is Yerushalayim and Shiloh is Nachalo. That's why you have two different words, two different places. One Shiloh, one's Yerushalayim. Makes sense. If you're going to tell me they're both Shiloh or they're both Yerushalayim, Menucha, Nachalo, I mean, why do you have to have both? Why don't you just call it Menucha, Nachala, Nachala? So the answer is Kasha, fair point. Okay, good. Okay. That has different, I mean, the answer could be that they have different aspects, the different places. Okay. Bishlam Laman Damar Zuvazu Shiloh. Okay, fine. According to the opinion that says they are both called, talking about Shiloh. Menucha, why is Shiloh called Menucha? Denachu mikivush, because they got to rest there from conquering the land. And Nachala, depalgu hasam Nachalos, that's where they divided the land up. Dechsev vayachlok lahem Yeshua vayipol lahem goral b'Shiloh al pi Hashem. They did the division. They drew the lots and they decided where everybody's portion was there while they were in Shiloh. Elamandam Razu v'Zu Yerushalayim. If you're going to say they're both Yerushalayim, Bishlam and Nachala, Nachalas Olam. I understand why it's called the Nachala, because it had an internal inheritance. El Menucha, why is it called Menucha? Why is Yerushalayim called Menucha? So the answer is Menuchas Aron. It is the resting place of the Aron. Dechsiv, as it says, Vayikinoach Aron. That's where the Aron rested. Rashi, top on the left column, says Vayikinoach Aron. Chipastiv velo mitzasiv. I look for that pasuk, I can't find it anywhere. That pasuk doesn't exist. So Rashi says it's probably another pasuk. V'me'enu b'ksuvim yeshe mikra acher b'divrei yomim. It's probably b'divrei yomim b'shom akuma Hashem Elokim lenochacha atav v'ruzecha. Could be that pasuk. Tosfos says it could be other psukim, but it's an interesting Rashi that Rashi just says that pasuk doesn't exist, right? Bishlam alaman damar zu v'zu Yerushalayim, according to the opinion that says. Right, if Art School tells you which pasuk, probably Art School just tells you. He tells you it's not a pasuk, right? Right, Art School says it, right?
It says it's not a pasuk.
There you go.
But it makes exactly what you just mentioned.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Right.
Psukim that start like that, Vayikinoach Aron, somewhere like in Yeshua.
Yes, there. So Tosfos has also other ones, and then others try to say, what about Vayibin Aaron, Uvenucho Yomar, right? So, okay,
But it's not in Yerushalayim.
Bells, right? Correct, right?
Yep.
But it's talking about the Aron, and therefore, okay, fine.
But
Yes.
who says this, that the Gemara is not careful when it comes to these psukim, right?
I mean, they usually don't misquote.
I thought they do misquote it all the time. I thought that's the whole thing.
That's always. Yeah, I don't know. We haven't had a lot of misquotes. We haven't had a lot. This one, it's obviously not that common if Rashi points it out, right? Rashi, yeah. And I think there was one that was recently before that also Rashi had said that also not quite the right pasuk. He says the Gemara quotes it not quite right. Bishlam alaman namar zu v'zu Yerushalayim. Fine, according to the opinion, says they're both Yerushalayim el Shiloh hava sharya. That would mean this pasuk that says it's talking about the bamos, that Yerushalayim you can't have bamos, but in Shiloh they would be permitted. So hashar your bamos. That would mean in Shiloh, while you're in Shiloh, bamos would be permitted. Well, then that makes sense because it says Vayikach Manoach as Gdi Hayizim Ves Hamincha Vayala Tzur Lashem. Manoach, Shimshon's father, brought a korban. He brought some goats and he made a mincha and he brought it on a stone before Hashem. So then I understand why he's bringing them on a stone, because it was a bama and he was doing it on a bama. That was okay because Shiloh's bamos were okay. Shiloh, but according to the opinion, the pasuk is telling us you can't do bamos in Shiloh. Bamos hava asiron my vayikach manoach. Why was Manoach taking it? Why was Manoach taking and doing a bama when it wasn't allowed? The answer is horos sha'ahaisa. The whole Manoach and Shimshon story is unique. He's literally being told things that don't apply the rest of the time, right? Shimshon was born a Nazir. It's all kinds of things. So his korban is unusual in many regards. The fact also that it's a mincha, and even if you could bring babamos, we said that bamos, mincha, and a bama doesn't apply, and this is according to the mandamar that mincha. Okay, so in any event, it's unique. Tana Rabbi Yishmael, we learned in Yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. It's like Rabbi Shimon. So in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Shimon was arguing against Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. But now in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, his own students, were teaching like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And they were saying, Damar, Zuvazu Yerushalayim, it's both Yerushalayim. V'simonech, the way you can remember that is Mashli Gavra Legavri. The many people got pulled after the individual. In other words, they switched sides. Rabbi Shmuel's students switched sides and decided it was Yerushalayim. Kol HaKodshim, then we said that all of the Kodshim that we had rules. If they were sanctified during the times when it was permissible, and then you brought it when it was prohibited, and all of these different rules. Amar of Kahana, Rav Kahana says, that which we said, that if you sanctified the korban during the time when bamos were permitted, and then you did shchita when the bama was prohibited, so then you get a lo saseh, but it's not kares. We learned that on Daf Kufvav. We had all those drashos. We had the first psukim had said that there's a lo saseh, of shechting, and we said that was when there was a permissibility of bamos, but then it became prohibited afterwards. Then the following psukim we're talking about when bamos were prohibited, and you sanctified it when bamos were prohibited, and you shechted when the bamos were prohibited, then you get kares. Okay, lo shano b'shchita. That rule is only talking about shchita though. Ava b'ha'ala kares. But if you burn it, then you still get kares, right? This korban that was sanctified when it was permissible, but you burn it after it was prohibited, you get kares. Karis nami mechayiv. You're also liable to karis. My time. Well, what's the reason for that? Damar kro, because the pasuk says va'alehem tomar. It says alehem, not to them, but on them. Alasmuchin. That parsha, which was right before, that was talking about when it was permissible, when you sanctified when it was permissible. Also, this next punishment, which when it's talking about the burning, if you do this burning, it also applies to that case as well. So therefore, if it was permissible when you sanctified it, and then you burned it when it was prohibited, it's still kares, according to this is what Rav Kahana says. Maskif lo Rabbi asked the following question: Miksiv alehem tomar. What are you talking about? It doesn't say alehem on that section, which is with an ayin. It says alehem ksiv. It says to them. To them means to Bnei Yisrael. It has nothing to do with the previous parsha. So therefore, we had this. We also talked about this before when we were in that section Daf Kufav. We had the same point. There is an aleph, not an ayin. Ve'od, and furthermore, Tanya, we learned a brisa that explicitly says not like you. Arba klos haya Rabbi Shimon Omer bekadshim. There are 4 rules, the general rules that Rabbi Shimon said by kadshim. Hekdishim b'shas iser habamos v'shachat v'hala b'shas iser habamos. If you sanctified it when it was prohibited and you slaughtered it or burned it when it was prohibited, bachut, outside of the base of Mikdash, hareim ba'aseh v'los aseh v'yishmin kares. Then everything is positive commandment that you didn't bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. Negative commandment that you brought it outside, and you get kares. Hekdishim b'shas heter habamos. Now, if you sanctify it when bamos are permitted, v'shachat v'hela b'shas iser habamos, and you bring it up and you slaughter it or bring it and you burn it when bamos are prohibited, harehin be'aseh v'losaseh. Then you get the positive commandment violation that you didn't bring it into the Beis HaMikdash, and negative commandment that you brought it outside, ve'in b'ayin kares, but you don't get kares. That's the contradiction right there. You sanctified it when the korbanos were permitted, but I burned it when they were prohibited, and it says no kares very clearly. And then he just brings the last of the 2 rules, which is hekdeshim b'shas iser, if you sanctified it when it was prohibited, but b'shas iser abamos v'shachat v'ela b'chutz b'shas heter abamos, and then you actually slaughter it when the bamos are permitted, harehin ba'aseh, then you get a positive commandment violation because you didn't bring it when it was required to the Beis HaMikdash. Vein bahen belos aseh, but there's no negative commandments, and obviously there's no kares. Hekdishim b'shas heter habamos v'shachat v'ela b'shas heter habamos, pater miklum. And of course, if you sanctified it when it was permitted, and you brought it when it was permitted, you're not violating anything, and that's fine. Tiyuv to Rav Kahana, tiyuv to that refutes Rav Kahana's point, and that's the end of that. The elu kodshim, then we go on and we're talking about, these are the rules by kodshim, that what is the difference between the individual bama and the community bama? How are the way that you bring the korbanos different? So first of all, they listed smicha. Smicha. There's no smicha by an individual by the individual bama. Why? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says lifnei Hashem v'samach. Right? You have to do smicha before Hashem. Shchitas tzafon, there's no such thing as slaughtering in the north by an individual bama. Why? Dichsiv tzafon lifnei Hashem, north before Hashem. It's not before Hashem. Matanos saviv, I have to apply the blood on all 4 sides of the mizbeach, only on the bama tzibur. Why? Dichsiv zarak al mizbeach saviv. You throw it on the mizbeach around, not on a bama. Tenufa, waving, dichsiv, That's only on the Bamas Tzibor, on the Mizbeach. So Hagasha, bringing it close by a korban mincha, I have to put it in the utensil and then bring that utensil to the Mizbeach. That says the pasuk says V'gisha Mizbeach has to come to the Mizbeach. Therefore, those rules only apply to the community Mizbeach, the Bama Gedola, not the Bama Ketana. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein mincha babama. Rabbi Yehuda said, there's no such thing as a mincha by a bama. Amar Rav Sheshes says, L'divrei Amar yesh mincha babama, yesh ofos babama. These two things go hand in hand. The pasuk that tells me that what korbanos are allowed and which ones are not is the pasuk in Perek Yud Zayin pasuk Hey. Right, it's written by the Parsha of Shkutei Hutz. It says, "V'zavchu zivchei shlomim laHashem." We said that is that you're slaughtering an offering of shlomim before Hashem. So there we said osam, right? If you slaughter these things outside, so then they're prohibited. But that means during when bamos are permitted, it would be okay for you to do it. But what specifically we're saying is okay? Slaughtering an animal. So since that's the case, menachos are excluded because they're not slaughtered. It's not an animal that's being slaughtered. If also, since it has specifically a zevach, ophos are not zevachim. Ophos are malika, right? So therefore, they're not included either. So either you include all or nothing, right? So therefore, that is the question. Interesting question in the Achronim that we won't get into because I didn't get into it exactly, but I thought it was very interesting to note. If you're bringing, according to the opinion that says you do bring birds on a bama bachutz, do you do malika on it or do you do shchita on it? Right? Is malika a din in korbanos, and therefore you would do it the same way outside? Or is it, as we said, shchita bachutz was the prohibition because malika was only a service that you do inside the azara. You don't do that outside. So therefore, if you're doing the bama bachutz, you do shchita on it. And there are different opinions in the Achronim on that topic. I thought it was interesting because not clear from the Gemara at all whether a bama on the outside on a bird korban, whether you do malika or shchita. Okay. Amar of Sheish. The next thing that was on the list that applies to applies to bama of the mizbeach, but does not apply to the individual. The kohen, right? You don't need a kohen by the bama individual. Dichsiv zaraka kohen says the kohen does zrika. So wherever you do zrika, right? You don't have to do zrika, we said, on the bama ketana, so therefore you don't need a kohen either. Big day shares, it says la shares bakodesh. You don't need the kohen garments because it says you have to serve in the kodesh. Ukli shares, you need the holy utensils. Asher yesher suban bakodesh. It only needs to be done in the kodesh. Reach nichoach, we don't have to have them uncooked before you put them on the mizbeach. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, then reich nichoach laHashem, it has to be reich nichoach in front of Hashem. Mechitza b'damim, you also on your bama outside doesn't have to have a line on it, indicating where you put the blood above or below. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, "V'haisa reshes ad chatzim mizbeach." The reshes is a din in mizbeach. And only in the mizbeach you need this reshes, this indicator where you would this lattice work that was on the side of the mizbeach. You don't need that on the bama. Richutz yadayim, also washing your hands. Dichsiv uvekarvasam el hamizbeach yirchatzu. When you get to the mizbeach, then you wash your hands. Amar Rabbi Barchama says, and here we've got a little bit of a girsa change. I'm going to read it with the corrected girsa. So if you're reading it inside, it might probably the article corrects it too, but because Rashi has it slightly different than the text of the Gemara. Lo shanu Lo shanu ella bekadshe bama gedola. This is only this which we said that by the korban tzibur, by the community or off by the bamas tzibur, that we're supposed to there's you still have to make a distinction about where you apply the blood. That is bekadshe bama gedola. That is if you sanctified it with the purpose of it being brought on the bama gedola, right? But the kriva b'bama gedola, and then you brought it as a korban in the bama gedola. Aval b'kadshe bama ketana. What if you decided I'm bringing my personal olah? I want to bring it on my individual one, and then you said, "Yeah, I'm going up to Shiloh anyway, or to Nov and Givon. That'd be better, right? Nov and Givon. Dekarvinu b'bama gedola. I want to bring it to the bama gedola. So then, ein chitzui. At that point, the kohen doesn't have to worry about it. He can just put it anywhere on the mizbeach because it's not a bama gedola korban. And this rule of needing upper or lower is a bama gedola issue. So therefore, if you sanctified it as an outside korban, it doesn't need it even if you bring it inside. Mosif Rabbi asks about that though. It says chazav ashok utrumos lachmei toda, that we learn in a brisa that the sections of the shlomim offering that are the meat that is given to the Kohen. Also, the parts of the loaves of the Toda that are given to the Kohen. Noagin bebama gedola ve'noagin bebama katana. Those are only given to the bama gedola, not to the bama katana, if you're bringing it inside but not outside. Now, it doesn't specify, because you could be bringing a shlamim, a personal shlamim. What if I sanctified my shlamim outside the Beis HaMikdash? So then why would I have to give it to the Kohen if I brought it inside? You just told me that the rules of once I sanctify it as an outside korban, it maintains the rules of an outside korban even if I bring it inside. So therefore, this seems to imply that if I'm bringing the korban inside, I always have to give it to the Kohen. So that means that even though I sanctified it outside, once I bring it inside, it should be applied. So the answer is, Ema bekodshe bama gedola ve'noagin bekodshe bama katana. You change the gears of the Mishnah of the Brisa slightly to mean that only if you sanctify it for the inside mizbeach, then it goes to the Kohen. If you sanctify it for the outer mizbeach, consistent with our rule about the blood applications, you don't actually have to give it to the Kohen. Ika de Amri, there are those who learn Rami Bar Chama a little bit differently, and it says Amri Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama says Lo shana ella bisman bama gedola ve'krivim bama gedola. This rule about requiring the blood to be offered from an outer korban, a bama katana korban, an ola that if I bring it inside, I have to apply the blood in the right place. That is only during the times when outer bamos are prohibited. So now that I come into the Beis HaMikdash ready with my animal to bring it properly, I have to apply it properly. Aval, bisman bama katana. But if it was during the times of Nov and Givon, when bamos, the outer bamos are acceptable, aval gav de karvinhu bebama gedola, even if you bring it inside, in chitzoy, I don't need to worry about where I apply the blood. Now we're going to use the brisa to support this. Meisiv Rabba asks the following question. He says, Chazav v'shoku trumas lachmei toda, noagin bebama gedola ve'noagin bebama katana. This rule that these offerings, if I brought it from outside and I bring it inside, so since it was an outside offering, I don't have to give it to the Kohen. It sounds like it doesn't matter, which means that this statement of Rami Bar Chama seems to be accurate. It does not make any, it doesn't make a, no, sorry, I take that back, right? In the Bama Gedola, it's a question on Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama said that if I bring it out, if it's a korban that's supposed to be brought outside, once I bring it inside, it still retains the rules of the outside, and I don't need to apply the blood any differently. This says, no, as long as I bring it on the Bama Gedola, even if I sanctified it outside, it still acquires the rules of the inside Mizbeach. So the answer is, Ema, we have to change the text to say, Noagin Bizman Bama Gedola, Ve'ein Noagin Bizman Behema Katana. We change it to say that if you bring it during the time of the Bama Katana, you don't have to give it to the Kohen. If you bring it in during the time of a Bama Gedola when the Bama Katanas are not okay, then you do always have to give it to the Kohen. Okay. Upligid Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Bar Chama is arguing with Rabbi Elazar's opinion, by the way. Dama Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, Olas Bamas Yachid. If I have the Ola of a bama that was a korban that was supposed to be brought outside, shechnisa bifnim, and you bring it into the walls of the base of the Mishkan or whatever. Kaltua mechitzos lekol davar. Once it goes into the walls, then it becomes an inside korban. That's not what Rabbi Bar Chama said. Rabbi Bar Chama says once you sanctify it outside, it stays an outside korban if you bring it inside. Says Rabbi Elazar, no. You bring it out, even if you sanctified it outside, as soon as you bring it in, it's an inside korban. Now, on that point, boy, Rabbi Zera says, Olas bamas yachid, shechnisa lifnim. So if I've got an ola that was sanctified outside, and I bring it inside now. Now, according to Rabbi Elazar, becomes an inside korban. Votzia lechutz. Now I take it back outside. Mahu, what is the rule now? Miamrinan kevan de'ailo. Do we say once it came inside, kaltula mechitzta, the walls of the Mishkan area here, this Nov Givon, the walls there now have made it an inside korban, and now it has to apply all the rules of an inside korban. Or now it's back outside, so it goes back outside again. Lav hainu plugta de Rabba Rav Yosef. Isn't that the same argument as Rabba and Rav Yosef? Ditznan, we learned in a Mishnah in Me'ilah. Kache kachim sheshachna bedarim. Let's say I have these korbanos, ola, chatos, they're supposed to be slaughtered in the north. I slaughter it in the south. It's a pasul korban now. Well, nevertheless, mo'alin bahen still has an isser of me'ilah. It's not like the animal died or got strangled or dropped dead. It's so puzzle that it's not a korban. It maintains its kedusha of a korban to some level, and therefore, if you use it, you have to burn it. If you use it, you commit mi'ilah. Now, v'boilu. So they ask the following question. Alu mahu sheyerdu. What if, again, slight change in girsa, what if you bring it up on the mizbeach now, right? What should you take it off? I mean, if it's not a korban, you take it off. But if it's slightly a korban, has some slight kedusha, you should leave it up there. Rabba Amar Yerdu. Rabba says you take it down. Rav Yosef Amar Im Alu Yerdu. Rav Yosef says no, once it goes up, it does not come down. So therefore, it's the same thing. Rabba saying once it goes up, it doesn't come down. Therefore, also, if you've got this korban that came from outside, got brought inside, it's now an inside korban. And Rav Yosef, Rabba will say, no, once it comes off the mizbeach, it's not a mizbeach korban anymore. Therefore, if you take your animal, you bring it inside, bring it back outside, it goes back to being an outside korban, and all the rules that apply. Tiboy l'Rabba, tiboy l'Rav Yosef. No, those arguments have nothing to do with each other. Because, tiboy l'Rabba, the argument about this outside korban coming inside, whether it becomes an inside korban now, is a question to Rabba. Why? Because ad kan lo kama Rabba ela b'mizbeach. He says only mizbeach can elevate something sanctity to the point that it doesn't come off the mizbeach. Dechazi le mikadish de lo chazi lo mikadish, because we know the rule is that if it is appropriate for it, it becomes holy. If it's not appropriate, it doesn't become holy. So there, aval mechitza afagav de lo chazi le kalta, but the walls, right? So therefore, its walls are going to sanctify whatever comes into it, no matter what. So therefore, it's not going to, even if you go outside, it doesn't matter, right? So therefore, the fact that Rabbah says that if it goes up to the Mizbeach doesn't sanctify them, that doesn't prove anything, because the Mizbeach won't sanctify something that isn't effective for it. But these walls can sanctify this korban that was from the outside. Or Rav Yosef, or I can look at it and see even Rav Yosef would agree that about the question where he doesn't know whether the walls are going to sanctify, because Ad kan lo kama Rav Yosef hasam ela dechad makamhu. The only reason why the Mizbeach is going to sanctify this animal that was slaughtered in the wrong place is because north-south, it's still all part of the courtyard. So therefore, the animal is not that ruined. But here, this korban being brought outside of the Beis Hamikdash area and being brought inside are two completely separate locations. The rules are completely different. So maybe it doesn't make a difference. So we don't know the answer to that. Milsa. That which seemed as a clear issue between Rabbah and Rav Yosef, they each had an opinion about whether this animal that was slaughtered in the south, whether it would be burnt on the Mizbeach or not. That was a question Rabbi Yanai had that question. Rabbi Yanai asked a question. If I have the limbs of a korban olas yachid, so now it was supposed to be brought outside. I brought it inside. Okay, well now it has the rules of the inside. And then, sha'olul mizbeach, you bring that animal up onto the mizbeach now. Now it's the same question that we had before about is the mizbeach going to catch it or not? Mahu sheyerdu. Now, should I take it down? Because, right? Because, we don't know the answer to that either. Because we want to be able to know the fact that you sanctified it outside, is it still an outside korban to some degree and the Mizbeach isn't working on it? Or now that you brought it in, it becomes an internal sacrifice and therefore the Mizbeach does catch it? That is parallel to the issue that Rabbi and Rav Yosef were discussing. Okay, so we have a question on that. Itmar. So he asked the following question. Shchitas laila bebamas yachid. What about slaughtering a korban on a bama at night? Right? We had all these other things that didn't matter about a bama. Can you slaughter a korban of a bama at night? So Ravu Shmuel, it's an argument between Rav and Shmuel. Chad amar kshera, Chad amar psula. One says it's kosher, one says it's not. They're arguing in Rabbi Elazar's point. The Rabbi Elazar, Rami Kroya Hadade. Rabbi Elazar contrasted the following psukim together. Ksev, the pasuk on the one hand says, Shmuel is going to, in Shaul was going to war. Right? And he says, right, we're going to bring some korbanos. Shmuel tells, right, he says that we're going to bring korbanos to be able to win this war. And it says, Vayomer begadatem, golu elai hayom even gadol. You got to bring me a big stone. right? We're going to make a bama right here, and we're going to bring korbanos today. It's got to be today because you can't bring them at night. Uksiv, then the next pasuk says, Vayomer Shaul. Shaul says, Putzu ba'am, Vamartim lahem, higishu elai ish shor v'yishteyehu. Everybody started to bring me their korbanos. Ushchatin b'zevachaltem lo sechatu Hashem lechol asadam. And they slaughtered it here and they ate it. And they didn't sin in order to eat from the blood. Vayagishu kolam ishoro biyado halayla. And everybody brought their animal that night. Vayishchatu sham, and they slaughtered it there. So what are they bringing the animal at night for? They just said that it was very important to bring it during the day, and then it says at night. So, Mar Mishani Kan Chulin Kan Be Kodshim. So this is the point that Rav and Shmuel are arguing in. That one says, you know, I have to explain it. The part where they were slaughtering at night, that was not Kodshim. They were just having dinner, right? They had meat at night. They brought their animals. That was Chulin. The part where they had to bring it during the day, that was their Kodshim. So that's the difference between the two psukim. The other one says, no, bummels are acceptable, and they're during at night. So therefore, kan bekoche bama gedola, kan bekoche bama katana. When you're using the community bama, so it has to be during the day. But the one that is a bama katana, the individual's bama, that's at night. So therefore, some of the kochim were brought during the day, some were brought at night. Okay. Itmar. Yeah, it has been said. Olas bamas yachid, an individual bama. Rav Amar intuna hefshet v'nituach. Rav says you don't have to take the skin off, and you don't have to cut it into pieces. Rabbi Yochanan Amar teuna hefshet v'nituach. Rabbi Yochanan says yes, you do. V'kamefel Rabbi Yossi Aglili. They argue in Rabbi Yossi Aglili's point, which we learned before. Detanya in our Bryce Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says Ola sheikrivi Yisrael b'midbar. The Jewish people, when they were at Har Sinai, they brought an ola. And there, Rabbi Yossi Aglili said, "Ein tu'una hefshet v'nituach." It did not need to have the skin taken off or to be cut up. Shein hefshet v'nituach ela oa moed ve'elach, because this rule of taking the skin off and cutting it up only started when they put up the Mishkan. There was no need for it before that. And then Mar Savar May Oel Moed ve'elach. One opinion says that from once the Oel Moed, once the Mishkan was built, then from then on, all olos needed to have the skin cut off and to be cut up. It doesn't matter where you're bringing that olah, that's the rule of olos. Mar Savar one says no, bama gedola in bama katana lo, that this is the rule by an oel moed, not by bama katana. Before we break for the siyam for coming for Shabbos, Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan's position. And it says, Dvarim shebein bama gedola bein bama katana. Here are the things that are distinct between a bama gedola and a bama katana. Keren v'keves v'yesod. We said that we don't need to have the corners on the bama katana. We don't need a ramp. We don't need the base. We don't need it to be square, v'ribua. But bama gedola, those are all big bama issues. Those are the main bama. But ve'en keren v'yesod v'keves v'ribua b'bama katana, not on a personal bama. Kior v'kano b'bama gedola. Also washing your hands. You don't need a basin or a base. You only need that by the bama gedola ve'en kior v'kano b'bama katana, not by the bama katana. Chaz of a shok b'bama gedola. The chaz of a shok is a rule that applies by the bama gedola. It doesn't apply ve'en chaz of a shok b'bama katana. Okay, so therefore, dvarim she shavsa bama gedola bama katana. Here are the things that are the same between bama gedola and bama katana. Shchita bama gedola katana. You need to have shchita of the korban. It has to be slaughtered properly. Also, hefshet v'nituach begedola katana. You need to take the skinning and you have to cut it up. Oh, so there you see. That's Rabbi Yochanan's shita right there. It's very clear. Dam matir umefagel begedola katana. The blood is the permitter for you to eat the meat when you throw the blood on the mizbeach. Also, if you have it, you can have pigul intention with throwing of the blood by bama gedola and bama katana. Mumin. Also, blemishes. Zman. Also, the Torah gives you a time limit to eat the karbanos. Begedola uktana. That also applies by the bama gedola and the katana. Okay, that's a good place for us to break. We will finish this last little bit up on Shabbos for the siyam.
Beautiful. Beautiful.